Hello and welcome to Dialogue. Chinese President Xi Jinping has emphasized the importance of scientific research and technology innovation at a major technology conference here in Beijing. With science and technology playing an ever more essential role in our lives, many countries, including China, are investing more in innovation. So, what is China's blueprint for strengthening scientific innovation? How will China-U.S. scientific competition play out? And what reforms are needed to foster more innovation here in China? To discuss all these issues and more, I'm joined by Professor Liu Baocheng from the University of International Business and Economics. Also by Professor Liu Ke, Dean of the School of Innovation and Entrepreneurship at the Southern University of Science and Technology. And later on, we'll also be joined by Andy Mok, Senior Research Fellow at the Center for China and Globalization. This is our topic, Wang Guan. Well, Professor Liu, always great to have you with us. President Xi himself attended this major assembly, the assembly of two leading Chinese scientific research institutions, the Chinese Academy of Sciences, also the Chinese Academy of Engineering, and made a major speech over there. What do you make of the significance of the top Chinese leader attending this conference?
Well, China is really standing on a double crossroad. One is that along the Chinese development path, whether we are able to shift the gear, from more of the resource-driven economic growth model into a more innovation-driven economic model. So that's a big question mark because many countries fail to escape the middle-income trap because they are unable to break the ceiling or the bottleneck of innovation.
Where is China now?
So China now is stepping onto the third stage, from factor-driven to efficiency-driven, now to innovation-driven. So this is really a very difficult path because you need to change a lot of cultural habits, you need to change the institutional setting, and also you need to encounter a number of global challenges. So the other one is, of course, is the global pressure because when China was doing the low-end job by producing the low-cost goods and services, so everyone was happy. Yeah. But right now, when you're really challenging the leadership of the conventional labs and the conventional industries, and particularly the countries represented like United States, and they feel, wow, you are really challenging us instead of doing the low-end job along the supply chain. So they will feel that they lose the sense of a monopoly and a hegemony over technology, and that's the pressure. So Xi Jinping is really addressing domestic development issue and also international climate that China is facing. But China is so determined to move on an innovation-driven economy to provide for a modernized and stronger China.
Right. Professor Liu Ke, what do you make of the fact that such a meeting is taking place at the Great Hall of the People, and the top leader of China is attending the conference and gave a speech?
Well, I think nowadays the innovation is a key word, or more important is the independent innovation. Why? It's because if you look at any organization, any company, even any country, right? Your competitive leading edge really come from two parts. Number one, if you can do better at cheaper. And number two, you do something other people cannot do, which calls innovation. For last 40 years, the Chinese economy and also the competitiveness mainly from the cost effectiveness. Because China can manufacture the goods with the lowest cost among the whole world. But after 40 years, in cities like Beijing, Shanghai, Shenzhen, the cost is increasing. So you no longer have the advantage of low cost. So now, if you cannot compete with cost, what else? You have to do something other people cannot do. That's called innovation. So at this stage of China's economy, we have to move to innovation-based economy. This way, then you have competitiveness. Otherwise, if you keep only doing those low-level manufacturing job, you're not going to have any competitiveness in the world. Meanwhile, China is a manufacturer manufacturing industry is still huge. So we import a lot of raw material, but we export a lot of goods. But what that means? That means you're going to leave a lot of the pollutions in this country. So that's why I think now the carbon neutral policy basically forcing China to innovate new technologies, so no longer rely on also like steel, coal, those traditional manufacture to compete. I think that's the key word I take from this conference.
Yeah, sustainability is really the key here. News just in, according to
sustainability need innovation.
Right, they're mutually complementary. In fact, news just in, according to Xinhua News Agency, Professor Liu Baocheng, President Xi Jinping on this very important assembly said this. He called for accelerated efforts in building China into a leader in science and technology and achieving self-reliance and self-strengthening at higher levels when it comes to scientific research and technological innovation. What are the challenges, to these visions?
Well, innovation becomes a household word. Every country, every company, every even individual boasts about innovation. But what is really the essence of innovation? One is that does it come to the ethical test that you innovate for a better good of the society? So you don't just build a sort of schmanzi to fool people. Yeah. So the other is that does it really have the practical utility that people can really benefit from it? So right now, for China, when we are really shifting the gear, the inertia is very strong because for companies who started at top with the low labor cost and even with the externalization over the environmental pressure, etc. So are they willing to change? So that's one challenge. And the other is that we need to streamline the institutional structure for innovation because scientific discovery is one thing, technology invention is another, and most importantly is really the market-driven innovation, which is really the commercialization of those technologies. So many technologies, they are put on the shelf and they cannot realize their value on the last mile. So that's also another very important challenge we face. And third one is international cooperation because yes, we really focus on indigenous innovation, but we need to find every possible way to share on both ends. So on the innovation part, on the knowledge part, and also on the market part. So without which innovation can really be a very slow process.
But earlier we talked about intellectual property protection, and in fact, in that regard, China is not perfect, but it has come a long way.
Definitely, I think now China has realized that the better protection of IP can really enhance the motivation for people to innovate and to have more discovery and then to translate them into commercial viability. So we do see that over the years we cannot see any shops along a Chinese street to sell the shoddy products or pirated CDs, etc. And now, with higher income, consumers are able to resist the temptation to buy cheaper but pirated, products.
The penalties are huge these days.
That's right. Right now, particularly now, we have, asserted into a number of international conventions on IP, for example, the Madrid Agreement, the PCT, and not to mention of the WIPO, etc. But in China, I think most significantly over the years, we have set up the IP court from the Supreme Court all the way down to the local court, and the litigation process is very tough against those infringements. So this is really a substantial improvement that we are really making.
Mm-hmm. Professor Liu Ke, I want to pick your brain on this as well. What are some of the bright spots, if any, when it comes to fostering innovation in China, and what are the challenges that are really hindering the efforts, preventing China from becoming a fully innovative society?
Well, I think like every nation has a history, but I think after 40 years of the reform and openness, now you come to the era that the Chinese can have a lot of creativity in the future. I mean, the old days, people said knowledge is a power. But I think now, today, it's really the creativity is the power, right? Mm-hmm. Knowledge, in old days, of course, it's difficult to access knowledge. But today, with one iPhone, you can have the whole encyclopedia in it. So now, really, the competitiveness has come from creativity. That's number one. And number two, I think the Chinese people are smart and also the most hardworking people in the whole world. So I think if we can set up the right system, also we can really enforce the intellectual property rights there. And I believe the whole innovation, the whole creativity will be released in the near future. And I always believe, right, if the whole world strictly follow the WTO regulations, the Chinese people will be able to will be very competitive, because the Chinese people, it's very hard to find a country with such a huge education base, right? You have like millions of engineers graduated every year from university and colleges, and also you have so many hardworking people, and also they're like to learn. So if you really give the IP rights, give the right system, I think sooner or later China will catch up in the creativity part, also in the innovation part.
Yeah, I think to add on
also,
that,
I think the more you can do innovation, the more contribution you can do to the world, right? For the last 100 years, the U.S. and Europe gave a lot of contribution to the world by doing their innovations. But now I think as China become the second largest economy in the world, it's time for China also contribute to the rest of the world, for invest more on R&D to make the world much better.
Yeah, to build on Professor Liu's statement with regard to education, I think he's talking about creativity, and the most important essence of creativity is really critical thinking. So that really comes down to the most basic issue of innovation, that how we can really reform our education system that are from question and answers, so that students can be equipped with the right type of critical thinking to challenge the unknown, and to challenge the convention, and to challenge the well set formula. So that's something that we need to pay attention to, although it does not really produce immediate the social and economic effect, but these are really fundamental to train the the talent pool for innovation.
Meng, born and raised in Shandong, been through college entrance exam over there from Shandong. I would very much agree with what you said. Professor Liu, what do you think? What can be done to really maybe reform China's education system to turn out more critical thinkers?
Well, I have a theory. If you don't know what to do, learn those who doing the best. For example, we always say, like Israel, a small country but very innovative. Then you go to look at how they training their kids in elementary school, in middle school, in high school, and in college. So we should spend 20 years learn from Israel, right? You learn, then you create, then you innovate. So I always say, first you learn. It's very dangerous to do innovation without have solid basis. So I always have theory, learning from the best country in the world. Like the most innovative country today in the whole world is Israel.
Yeah, but when it comes to China's STEM education, it looks like it has been pretty successful by some standards. When it comes to OECD's maths and science testing scores, Chinese students fared really well. But are those the only standards that we should pay attention to?
Well, to have the basic knowledge base.
Professor Liu, hang on a second. Professor Liu Baocheng, why don't you go first?
Yeah, to have the basic STEM, this is really the fundamental, this is really the building block for innovation. But to have the right type of creativity, that's another different story, because this does not only require the STEM, but also you require a lot of philosophical thinking, liberal arts, and more importantly, it's more of a liberal environment for people to exercise their curiosity And because innovation, after all, is driven by curiosity, not only by utility. And the other is that they are able to, have a global vision. As where are those the best part? Professor Liu Ke mentioned about Israel. That can be America, that can be Japan, etc. They need to know what is really the existing model, not only the knowledge, but also the right type of model to operate on. And third is really competition, because innovation is really driven by competition of people, by competition of resources, and a competition of the market. So, the venture capitalist, competition can really push those, education system to move forward with the right type of talent pool to be prepared for the market competition.
Professor Liu Ke, do you have anything to add?
Well, there's a theory say that like creativity equals the knowledge you accumulate times curiosity. So our educational system is very good for helping kids to accumulate knowledge. But the curiosity, right, initially is increasing, but later if you follow this education system long enough, then you kill the curiosity. So by that time, if the curiosity becomes zero, then no matter how much knowledge you accumulate, is zero for creativity. So I think it's really you have to treat each case differently, respect that the people are created differently. So when you do the education, you should give different people, let them just develop themselves based on their own interests and their own feature. You cannot just give all the students one class textbook or test them all the same thing, measure them in the same standard. That this way you only can create the education system only produce people get high score but less of creativity. I think that's why we can see, right, compare like what's our education system and what's the education system in Israel and in US and the rest of the world. Then let's learn what's the difference. Once you know the difference, then you compare the advantages and disadvantages, then let's try to learn from them.
There's a lot of catching up to do, let's face it, and hopefully China's educators will heed what you have said. Professor Liu Ke, Dean of the School of Innovation and Entrepreneurship at Southern University of Science and Technology, thank you so much for joining us tonight. Professor Liu, let's shift gears a little bit and talk about another very important issue, that is China-U.S. technology confrontation. It seems to be ever intensifying since 2018. Biden seems to have inherited much of Trump's tech confrontation and trade tariffs against China. What's next?
Well, it seems that they have been made believe that China is really posing quite a challenge instead of the right source for collaboration with the United States. So there is more and more bipartisan consensus over such an issue, and hence the Competition Act and also the Endless Frontier Act, etc., they are really targeting China. So for the U.S. really to implement such a law to really boost innovation, we have nothing to blame. But to point to China as a challenger, and this is totally wrong, even for their own sake, because globally we are so much interconnected. This is no longer a Cold War period between the United States and Russia, where they have little entanglement. But right now we are talking about hundreds of billions of U.S. dollars trade and investment together. So how we can really streamline the supply chain by building a sort of integration from innovation to utility. So this is the right type of approach. But now innovation is really being politicized to such a point that China will have to fund their own strategy to get more independent over the supply of the United States, and plus that such sort of containment will be really a frugal effort, because innovation without being commercialized over a larger market like China, how those research labs are motivated, and how the venture capitalists have the right type of incentive to continue to support innovation. So, and also the innovation has shelf life. So you have 17 years protection or best 21 years protection. That really reminds me a very interesting movie, The River Runs Through It. Maybe you have seen it. Brad Pitt started that. He loved his boots. His father gave it to him so much that he does not really want to wear it until his size really couldn't fit the boots anymore. So technology is like Brad Pitt's boot. So if you really keep it, you cherish it so much and value it so much and put it on the shelf and nobody can really have access to it, then you're really wasting time and wasting the most valuable thing. And most importantly, it's a crime to deter the human progress in civilization.
Well, you know what? I'll look for that movie for sure. The first thing I go back home tonight. Andy, Mark, great to have you with us. So basically, we have been talking about the fact that Chinese President Xi Jinping attended a major science assembly attended by China's top engineers and scientists, and said this. He wanted China to achieve self-reliance in core technologies. What do you make of the significance that the top Chinese leader attended this conference?
Well, I think the symbolism, Wang Guan, of course, is very important. And I think even more important is the statement or the call that President Xi made, which is that when science and technology prosper, the nation prospers. And when technology strengthens, the country strengthens. So I think this is a very important symbol, as well as I think a very clear message that China as a country, and we all know how formidable China's organization and bureaucracy can be in dealing with opportunities as well as challenges like COVID-19, that the country should focus on strengthening its science and technology capabilities, because it's becoming more and more important as we move into, as we already are in the digital age, that technology has always been important, as I heard Dr. Liu Baocheng say, but that it's becoming even more important. And I think this is the main reason for President Xi's statement.
Right. We all know, Andy, you know that as well as I do, that ever since the trade conflict between China and the United States, China has been saying it is important to have this self-reliance on core technologies. You have been living in China this whole time. How do you think China has fared when it comes to making scientific breakthroughs and scientific innovation?
Well, Wang, I've been following this space for literally decades. And I think that we only have to look back 10, 20 years ago that most so-called experts in the West were saying that China cannot innovate, that the only thing China can do is copy. And I think many people were shocked and surprised by how quickly China has advanced over the last few years. I mean, certainly we look at everything from mobile payments, Huawei, with not just smartphones, but networking equipment. And most recently, Douyin or TikTok, which is really the first company that places artificial intelligence at the center of its product. So I think that, based on my own observation, I think the growing consensus is that China's made remarkable strides. There's still a long way to go, of course. Semiconductors, I think, is the big question mark right now. But again, as we see China aligning, coordinating, and mobilizing resources to tackle this challenge, this opportunity, we can, if history is any guide, I think we could expect major advances in this space as well.
What reforms and changes, are needed for China to become a more innovative society?
Well, I think a couple things can be done. One very important initiative with the 14th five-year plan is new infrastructure, and this is hardware, of course, so electric vehicle infrastructure, other types of infrastructure, but also soft infrastructure as well. So making sure that information research is not siloed, that the loop from or the path from research to development to commercialization is shortened. So that's everything from making sure that conferences, whether they're online, offline, hybrid conferences, can be held more smoothly, more conveniently. Scientific publications are more quickly disseminated. I think these are very important areas. And of course, just the training and the development of a new cadre of researchers and scientists, as well as engineers and technicians, need to be addressed. And we are seeing this too. I forget the number, but China launched dozens of artificial intelligence colleges in the last few years as one example of how this is being addressed. But of course, this is a mammoth undertaking, and I think we are at the beginning of this.
Yeah, Professor Liu, we've talked about the fact that China has filed an unprecedented number of patents. Some research, some data even put China's application of patents the top of the world. How should we, put the numbers in perspective?
Well, this is really a very encouraging news that China is staying on the top, both in terms of the publication in the scientific paper like Nature and Science, etc. So this is really a knowledge creation process, and the other is fighting the patent protection. The invention part, although it's really on the increase, the utility part and also the exterior outlook still takes a big bulk of the entire IP that we have filed for international protection. So this means that most of the innovation for China continue to stay in the on the two ends. One is on the top end of scientific research, and the other is on the application part for the technological breakthrough. So this is something that we are still feel rather vulnerable at the moment. So right now, we hope that on this part, more venture capitalists, it's not only the government that are going to push, with subsidies and with a number of rewards, etc. But it is really the like Chinex, comparable to Nasdaq, that are able to continue to fuel the right of capital, to recruit the type of fruition from technological invention with certain breakthroughs.
Right. Andy, what are some of the global best practices, including those in the United States, that perhaps China can learn a thing or two from?
Well, I think one of the most important ones, Ron, is being a magnet for talent all around the world. There's no doubt that the university system in the United States has not just done a world-class job of educating not just undergraduates, but master level, PhDs, postdocs, especially in technical fields. Now, we need to note that many of the most talented and the most accomplished of these come from places like China and India. So I think one of the most important things that China can do to emulate the United States is create a similar type of platform ecosystem that welcomes talent from all around the world. We need to recognize that the rise of China's R&D ecosystem is in some sense inevitable just because of the size of the population, the growth rate of the economy. But even so, there are many more smart people outside of China.
Diversity is a strength. We'll have to leave it there, Andy. In the interest of time, Andy Mok and Professor Liu Baocheng, thank you both so very much. And that will do it for this edition of Dialogue. Thank you for tuning in. I'm Wang Guan in Beijing.